Again, ladies and gentlemen, we're about to begin the funeral service. We ask for those that are standing to please be seated. If you have a cell phone or pager, if you could turn it to the silent mode. Officiating today is Rabbi Eli Samber.
Mizmor LeDavid Adonai Roi Lo Yachsar B'Nashdesha Yarbitzeni Al Mei Menuchos Yin Aleini Nafshi Yishayvev Yancheni B'Maglid Tzedek L'man Shemo Gam Ki Elech B'Getz Al Moves Lo Yira Ro Ki Ato Imadi Shiftecho Mishantecho Hema Yinachamuni Taroch L'Fanai Shulchan Neged Sayroi Dishanta B'Shem Roshi Kosi Rivayok Ach Tov V'Chesed Yodefuni Kol Yemei Chayoi V'Shavti B'Veis Adonai Li Orich Yamim. A song of David. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not lack. God causes me to lie down in lush pastures. God leads me beside tranquil waters. God restores my soul and guides me in righteous paths for God's name's sake. Though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. You are with me. Your scepter and staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in full view of my adversaries. You have anointed my head with oil. My cup overflows. May only goodness and kindness pursue me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord for the length of days. Eishes chayil mi yimtza v'rachok mi b'nei michra, botach b'lev ba'ala v'shalom lo yechsar, gemalasu tov v'lo yira kol yemei chayeha. Darshat Semeru Fishtim Batas Bechevitz Kapel Hahoisa Kania Soicha Mimerchak Tovi Lachmo. Vatakam Beod Laila Vatitain Teref Levesa Vachaik Lenara Seha. Zamama Saudabetika Chayu Mi Pri Kafea Notokorim. Chagra Beoz Masnel Veta Amed Zeros El Tamo Kito Sachra Layichba Balai Lanera. Yadeha Shilcha Vakisha Vakapel Tamchu Falech Kapa Parso Leoni Viadel Shilcha Levyoin. Leisira levesa mishala ki chobesa lavushanim. Marvadim asasa la sheish biargoman levusha. Noida basharam bal v'shifta imzik nei aretz. Sadin asasa batim kar b'chagar nasna laknani. Oz v'hadar levusha v'tischak liyayim acharoin. Pia pascha b'chachma v'seiras chesed al l'shana. Sophia halichas besa v'lechem aslus lo sochel. Kamu v'nea v'yashua ba'ala v'halala. Rabos bonus asuchayil ve'atalis al kulona sheker achein vehevel hayofi isha yiras Adonai hiti salel tenu lo mi pri yodeha v'halelua v'sha'arim maseha. The concluding sentences, so appropriate. Her children arise and praise her. Many daughters have accomplished well, but you surpass them all. Grace is false and beauty is vain. A woman in awe of God, she should be praised. Give her the fruits of her own hand, and let her deeds praise her in the gathering places. We are here today, gathered to pay final respects, Kavod Achron, to Deborah Gittel Bas Yitzchak, of blessed memory, daughter of the late Irving and Ann Blumofe, sister of the late Rabbi David Blumofe and Rochelle Cantor, Zichronim Livracha, mother of Yitzi, Avi, and Dalia, Yosef and Lauren, grandmother Jordan and Tanya, Levi and Chelsea, Chava, Shira, great-grandmother Kinsley, Scarlett, Mason. Today we're going to hear Divrei Hesped from her dear son Yosef, her lifelong friend Rochelle Perman, her sister-in-law Amy Blumofe, and her niece Charlene Sales.
All right. A little windier than I expected, but it's a beautiful morning. First, I'd like to thank everybody for coming today. My mom would have been pretty happy with the turnout. A lot of my mom's old friends and family. Wonderful that you all can make it this morning. But I'd like to start by taking a minute to extend my heartfelt gratitude to Rabbi Eli Samber for officiating my mother's funeral today. As an educator and not the rabbi of a congregation, Eli doesn't typically do funerals or weddings for that matter. However, Eli has known my mom since the two of us were in kindergarten at Ari Crown together more than 50 years ago, and he graciously volunteered to be there for my family on this most important day. Eli, we have been and always will be brothers. I also want to share with everyone how much my brother Yitz has done these past 6 months to help Lauren and I take care of my mother. We had recently moved my mom to a memory care facility near us in Wisconsin. We live about 30 miles south of Madison. Yitz has stayed nearby so he could visit my mother on days we could not be with her. Also each week, Yitz would drive 2.5 hours to Hungarians here in Skokie every week to buy my mom the food she loved. Once my mother's weight started to really fall, Yitz would feed my mom snacks most afternoons, her favorite being crackers with Romanian chopped liver on it. When my mom was first hospitalized this past week, Lauren and I were out of town. Yitz stayed with my mom so she wouldn't be alone until Lauren and I could be by my mom's side. At the end of my mom's life, Yitz really lived up to the fifth and what my mom would have said was the most important of the 10 Commandments, Chavedus avicha v'yasimecha, honor your mother and father. Above and beyond, I really need to thank my wife, Lauren, who has been unbelievable as a daughter-in-law for my mom, especially since she started getting sick. When we moved her into Park Plaza in 2018, Lauren spent night after night on the floor in the living room so she'd be there with my mom so she would be comfortable during the transition. Times she would fly in from California to fire a caregiver that wasn't living up to my wonderful wife's standards. My mom loved Lauren. Now let's get to the star of the show. My mom, Deborah Gittel, as her father and brother like to call her. My mother was a very special person, said every son and daughter at their mother's funeral. However, as everyone here today knows, truer words have never been spoken. My mom was generous to a fault, if that is such a thing. She was kinder than kind. My mom loved everything Jewish. Whenever something happened, whether it was local or around the world, she would always say, "Is it good for the Jews?" Most of you, I'm sure, remember that one. She would invite young couples that were new to the neighborhood all the time over for a Shabbos meal. Let me clarify that. She would invite them over for a delicious Shabbos meal. If a cousin, friend, or even a friend of a cousin was coming to town for a simcha, my mom would be the first to invite them to stay by her. No one, and I mean no one, liked babies more than my mom. First of all, she was absolutely crazy about her grandchildren, and her grandchildren were crazy about their bubby. On top of that, she had 2 beautiful great-granddaughters. Kinsley just turned 3 a few weeks ago. Scarlett is 18 months today. And now we have a very handsome, I have a handsome grandson. It was my mother's great-grandson, Mason, who was just 3 weeks old as of Wednesday. Man, oh man, would the healthy version of my mom have gone crazy over her great-grandchildren. Speaking of my mom and babies, many, many years ago, we were out to dinner at the Chinese restaurant, Mitsuyan, next to Jerusalem on Devon. It was either Mother's Day or her birthday. I think it might have been Mother's Day. As we were finishing dinner, another table was getting up. There was a young mother, probably in her late 20s, holding a baby that maybe was a year and a half, 2 years old, a cute little roly-poly Zoftig baby with these seriously meaty polkies. The baby walks by in her mother's hands, and my mom just reaches out and grabs her some polkies. And she goes, oh my goodness, look at these polkies. I said, Mom, that's a stranger's baby. What are you doing? She didn't care. And the mom didn't care either because she was a bubby. That was just my mom. A little more background on my mom for those that don't know. Our parents got divorced when I was 5 years old. My brothers were 7 and 8. My bubby, my mom's mom, came to live with us so my mom could go back to work. She worked 3 jobs, and to go back to college at age 28. My mom graduated from college with an accounting degree. She made the dean's list. She took and passed the CPA exam, and soon after got a job with the Internal Revenue Service. My mother would spend 20 years with the IRS, and she would ultimately audit stock brokerage firms. She would even go on to train auditors of stock brokerage firms. I remember years ago how excited my mom was when she came up with a new method for the IRS to collect taxes on these brokerage firms. And then her boss had her train other auditors on those methods. My mom was so passionate about her job at the IRS, but she also could joke about it. One day when I was a teenager, we were driving down the road and she saw a truck driving in the opposite direction. It had a hook on the back called a pinto hook. And for the record, as she would explain to me, these pinto hooks require a certain tax to be paid. She would joke and say, that's it, I'm turning around, I'm pulling this guy over to see if he paid his tax. Thinking she was serious, I'd beg her not to. She'd start laughing her head off so hard we had to pull over to the side of the road. Matter of fact, I think we were right on Skokie Boulevard when that happened. But in reality, my mom underplayed her significant job with the government. Sometime around 1988, we were in town around Passover, Pesach, and she asked me if I could give her a ride downtown to a brokerage firm she was auditing. And back then, the computers weren't so small. And she had her books and everything else. It was a brand new audit, and she needed my ride. So I take her there, we go to the front, to the security guard, and said, my mom says, okay, my name is Debbie Fox, I have an appointment to go upstairs with the CFO so-and-so. And he looks at his list, he says, I'm sorry, ma'am, you're not on the list. He says, well, I need to go upstairs, so I'm gonna go upstairs. And he's like, no, ma'am, I don't think you understand. You're not going up there, you're not on the list. My mom looks at me, reaches into her purse, grabs her IRS credentials and says, IRS, I'm going upstairs. This man was shaking like a leaf. I've never laughed so hard because my mom was my mom. Literally, he's running to the elevator, opening the door, holding it open for my mom. As the elevator's door is closing, he's like, I'm so sorry, I'm so sorry. Get my mom set up, I come downstairs, and as I'm walking to the door, he starts apologizing profusely. Please let Mrs. Fox know I'm so sorry, I don't want to get in trouble. Obviously, the man never got in trouble, but seeing my mom with that kind of power was pretty crazy. Soon after my mom retired from the IRS, she became a shotgun, a matchmaker for Simcha Link in Chicago. My mom loved it. She did it for probably 10 years. She had wonderful friends she worked with. She would tell us stories of the couples she would try to put together. And one couple, and it's commonplace for if you were to find a match for a man and a woman and they were to get married, they give the shotgun some kind of a gift. Nothing determined, it's whatever they're comfortable. Well, one such couple loved my mom so much for setting that up that they flew her to London for their wedding, put her up in a hotel, and she was basically the guest of honor at these people who she really didn't know, but got to know, and she had the most wonderful time. She really loved that. Speaking of weddings, after Lauren and I got married, 1985, 37 years ago, My mom went off to Vegas with us for a couple of days. My mom loved Vegas. Sitting at a blackjack table, drinking a screwdriver, smoking a spring cigarette. My mom loved it. And by the way, my son Levi and his beautiful bride-to-be Chelsea are getting married in November. We're going to continue with the tradition, so we'll see you in Hawaii. I might be kidding. I'm not sure. My mom had the most amazing group of friends. Many of them she's been friends with since childhood. One of her friends called my mom every day from Israel for the last 4 years to joke around and to sing some Zamirot. Her friend continued to call, even when my mom no longer knew who this special friend was. One of her friends would call her every Erev Shabbos to wish her a good Shabbos, just like she did for the previous 20 plus years. When my mom could no longer answer the phone, nor did she know who this person was, she would leave a message on her cell phone every week, even though she knew she would probably not hear it. When my mom would feel sad, I would start to name all of her friends she had that loved her. After more than a minute of rattling off names, she would say, "Okay, enough already." No mother has ever done more for their kids than my mother. In the mid-90s, my mother didn't hesitate to borrow off her retirement, her credit cards, the equity in her home to give mine and my brother's new company a fighting chance. I'm happy to say that we paid her back in spades. Look, it is normal to feel sad on a day like today. A day we bury an exceptional mom, Bubby, great Bubby, aunt, sister, cousin, and friend. The thought of never seeing her again, never having her amazing, delicious chicken soup, brewsteckel, or sweet and sour meatballs. Never watching her sing or dance in one of the plays she really enjoyed participating in. My mom loved to sing and dance. Not having her tell her silly jokes or just her everyday kibitzing. However, because of the terrible disease that is dementia, the woman who I called mom hasn't been with us in some time. No one as special as my mom deserves to go through what she went through. While it took much longer than we would have ever wanted, Hashem finally stopped my mother's suffering and has reunited her with her mother, father, sister, and brother. And that, along with all of the wonderful memories my mom has left us, is why I personally am celebrating today, and I am not mourning. When I was 7 or 8 years old and my two brothers on Shabbos were playing with friends, I'd lie in bed with my mom on a Shabbos afternoon, and she would make up these silly stories just to entertain me. She was good at that when we weren't wrestling. My mom would pin me down and say, "Who do you love most, Yosef?" And I would say, "My Bubby first, then you and my dad the same." I felt it was the right politically correct thing to say. My mom would tell me about this limerick that she learned from a neighbor when she was my age, 6 or 7, 8 years old. It was said by radio personalities to warm up their vocal cords. She used to joke that just as my Bubby, her mom, after her memory left her, would recite the meaning of law that she learned 40 years ago from our Zaidi, that my mom would still remember that silly limerick if her memory ever left her. Turns out it was, in fact, one of the last things that my mom remembered. This one's for you, Mom. If you know it, please feel free to follow along. 1 hen, 2 ducks, 3 squawking geese, 4 Limerick oysters, 5 corpulent porpoises, 6 pairs of Don Alvaro's tweezers, 7,000 Macedonians in full battle array, 8 brass monkeys from the ancient sacred crypts of Egypt, 9 apathetic, sympathetic, diabetic, old men on roller skates with a marked propensity towards procrastination and sloth, 10 lyrical, spherical, diabolical denizens of the deep who haul stall around the corner of the quo of the quay of the quivery, all at the same time. My mom would have gotten a real kick out of that. I have video of her actually almost getting it all the way through about 7, 8 months ago. My mom has missed her mother, my bubby, every day since she passed in 1993. And I want to share a quick story of something that happened to me a year later. We were working downtown Chicago, and I missed my bubby. It was a Friday, and I was having just sort of a challenging week, and I'm like, I haven't seen my bubby since she was buried a year earlier, and I really want to go see her. So I figured, okay, I know where it is. I could find it. It's Waldheim Funeral Home, and it's Roosevelt and Harlem. So I took Roosevelt all the way down from downtown, got to Harlem, and I realized, holy cow, I don't know which part of this massive cemetery my bubby's buried. I started walking. I walked around for 2 hours. The sun's going down. It's getting close to Shabbos, and I said to myself, you know what? My bubby wouldn't appreciate me having to leave the cemetery to visit her on Shabbos. So I guess I'm not going to see her today. I'm going to go home. I'll call my mom after Shabbos, and Sunday morning I'll go back. I'll visit my bubby. I turned around to go to the car, and it was right in front of me. My bubby's gravestone was less than 10 feet away. My bubby did a lot of things from above with Hashem by her side, and now she's got my mom by her side. My bubby and my mom were very close. 6 months ago, when her memory was so far gone that I'm sure she no longer remembered that I was her favorite son, just kidding, I did get her to try to admit it, even at the end, and it didn't work. She said, I love you all the same. She said to me, I miss my mom, I want to see her. And not wanting to upset her, I told her, Mom, don't worry, Bub's in Florida on vacation and you will see her soon. There's no more waiting, Mom. Today you get to be with Bubby, Zadie, Uncle David, and Aunt Rochelle in Olam Haba for eternity. I love you, Mama. And now her good friend Rochelle Perman's going to come up. Thank you, Rochelle.
I really haven't prepared anything. I jotted down a couple notes, but I'm the one person here who knows Debbie longer than anybody in the whole group. I know Debbie since she's 6 years old. Debbie went to school with my youngest sister, Ella Shalom, and slept at my house frequently. Now you have to understand that was no small thing. We were 5 children, 2 adults, in a 2-bedroom apartment. There was always room for Debbie. And Debbie always made room for anyone else. She had room for any young couple who didn't have family or friends nearby or a relative. There was a time when the 4 of us, Dorothy Starr, Vivian Sklar, myself, and Debbie, got together almost every Shabbos and nearly every Yontif. It was for us a means where we didn't have to feel we were imposing on our children. If we wanted to be with our children or they wanted to be with us, it was okay because we had another option. Debbie's house was always open. Young person came in from out of town for Simcha Link. Debbie was the first to say they could stay by her. Debbie was a special, warm, caring, nurturing, funny, loving woman. She will be missed by all. For me, she was a sister except in blood, and I've missed her a long time.
I'm not that short. Maybe I am. Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you all for coming to honor Deborah Gittel. When I was 19, I met my future sister-in-law and my mother-in-law, Anne. And I met my sister-in-law, Rochelle. Debbie was 16 years old. Not as young as 6, but it's okay. It was nice having a younger sister close to my age. Rochelle was older than me, and that was nice also, having an older sister. Debbie and I grew up together. We would spend holidays together, have children together, and everyone would look back and go back and forth between our houses. I found over the years that Debbie was one of the most helpful, loyal, and dedicated women that I would ever know. She was a single mother who raised 3 very active boys. During this time, she went to college, worked for the IRS, took care of her mother, my mother-in-law, Anne. She helped anyone who needed help. She was caring and available when needed. When Rochelle got sick, when David got sick, while working full-time, Debbie was always there. When she retired from the IRS, she worked for the Chicago Chesed Fund as a successful shadchan. I remember when she went to London. I was very, very happy for her. She continued her dedication to others. Whoop. Sorry. Both secularly and religiously. When I contacted a friend this week, she told me it was because of Debbie, because of her influence, that she became more religious, because Debbie was her inspiration. Debbie would come over with the boys and with my mother-in-law, Anne, to our house for holidays, for Sukkot, for Pesach, for Shabbat. It was a joyous time for all. Everyone would have fun, saying jokes, having laughter, playing Scrabble, dashing, and the boys became very good card players. She was proud of her children. She was proud of being a Blumofe. She was proud of everything she ever accomplished. She made me very welcome in the family. Her niece, Jordana, said yesterday that she remembers her Aunt Debbie taking care of her mother and the boys. Being involved, playing Scrabble, Debbie was always very professional. Each of my children, Noah in California, Jordana in Florida, Ari, who has come in from Florida, and Jonathan and Eliza from Israel. Are saddened that Debbie is gone. Her cousins, Adina and Judy, would have liked to have been here to honor Debbie. Unfortunately, they were not able to travel. Debbie is 13 years younger than David. She was born just before David's bar mitzvah. Rochelle had to babysit her, so neither of David's sisters were at his bar mitzvah. David tried to do as much as he could for her to support her as a single mom. The last few years have not been good ones, health-wise. As Cousin Joel said, I am sorry she's gone, but I am grateful that she is no longer suffering. I believe that she's now sitting around a large table with the Blumofe family, her big brother David, her sister Rochelle and brother-in-law Jerry, and most importantly, her mother Anne and her father Irving, laughing and catching up on the family. Rest in peace, Deborah Gittel.
I'm Charlene, Debbie's oldest niece. Debbie made a splash even as a baby. Her mom, Anne Blumofe, the Blue Bubby, for those of us in the know, was unaware that she was carrying her until the doctor at one of her regular appointments congratulated her on her pregnancy. When Debbie was a baby, my mom, Rochelle, helped her mom, Blue Bubby, by taking Debbie for carriage walks in the park. Invariably, someone would approach them and remark, to the then 15-year-old, or maybe 16-year-old, I'm revising it based on what you said, Amy, would remark to my mother what an adorable child she had. My mom was mortified. When Debbie was a teenager and I was beginning elementary school, we used to hang out together. I'll never forget the time when we were standing in her family kitchen and she asked me what I would do if I was in the desert with one other person and we had between us only enough water for one of us to survive. I'm sure many of you have heard this conundrum. She then explained to me what the sages said about it, and this is how I was first introduced to Talmud. I thought she was awesome, and I haven't stopped considering that very problem, the one about the people in the desert. Debbie was 15 years younger than my mother and 12 years younger than David. She was part of their generation, and she was also part of our next generation. I never really felt comfortable calling her aunt. She was so much more than an aunt and so much more like a friend. My next memory was attending her wedding celebration in our house. It felt very special to one as young as I was. But soon there were 3 little boys. I want you all to hear about the 3 little boys. Soon there were 3 little boys literally running circles around all of us. Their laughter and their good humor had to have been inherited from their mom. Her default mode was humor and laughter. After her divorce, Aunt Debbie spoke on the phone to Mom a lot. I don't remember details, only the tumult of a young woman trying to raise 3 active, intelligent boys on her own, and a lot of heartfelt advice and support. And then, just like that, Debbie was a successful CPA working for the IRS, and the 3 little boys were grown up, having achieved success in their careers and producing beautiful grandchildren and great-grandchildren for her. In retirement, Debbie continued to do great things, this time working for Chicago Chesed Fund, as several others have said, making shidduchs. She was devoted to bringing young couples together. Whenever I spoke to her, she was asking me, "Do you have one for this one, for that one?" It was really a life's work for her. And it gave her so much joy when she made a match. So what superpowers moved Debbie through her life? First, her family. Debbie had a wonderful, supportive, and loving family. And David and Amy, my mom and dad, and as her boys grew older and married, her boys and their families. When my mom got sick and needed surgery, her 3 daughters spent all our time at the hospital, but we weren't alone. Debbie was always there with us, and maybe she was working full-time at that time, I don't even know, but she was with us the whole time. She loved our mom like a big sister, and despite my mom's early protestations, like a second mother. She has maintained really close friendships throughout her life. They are just a hallmark of Debbie. And as an adult, I once spent a Shabbos at Debbie's with 2 of her friends. It was like a pajama party. We giggled all night and into the next day. These friends cared deeply for one another, and you're such a treasure to her. Of course, Debbie had an amazing sense of humor. Any discussion with Debbie was always wrapped in good humor and laughter. And her biggest superpower was that she was full of love. At the end of any visitor phone conversation, we hugged. She told me I was her favorite niece, wink, wink, which I'm sure she told my sisters. She asked about my children and their children and promised to pray for them if she thought they needed it. Adam and Ben, our 2 sons, David's and mine, loved her right back. When they visited town with their children, we made a beeline with the children to see their great Aunt Debbie. I want to add something, having listened to what other speakers said. Debbie is we all know, a very religious person, very, very religious, and, you know, observance and faith were very, very important to her. And one of the saddest moments for me with Aunt Debbie was the last time we went out for lunch. We went to someplace on Tui, I think, and this is not the first time this happened, but she could no longer recite the Birkat Hamazon. So when I got ready to say it, I said, excuse me, I'm just going to say it. She said, can you say it aloud, and can you look at me when you say it so we can say it together? So we looked at each other. Thank God I knew it mostly by heart, and we said the Birkat Hamazon. It took a little longer, but it was the most beautiful recitation with Aunt Debbie. Here are some of my sister Patty's words about Aunt Debbie. I love Debbie. I love Debbie with all my heart. She walked into a room and all of a sudden it was a party. She was so fun and funny. She was a wonderful, supportive, complimenting aunt. We had great talks so many times, even after we met with family for lunch, a slice of life, which we did so often. We would sit in her car and we talked about things. I felt so comfortable with her. That's how she made everyone feel. She made you feel special. I feel like she was a true friend who had your back. She was a safe haven. There should be another sheet here. Yes. My sister Lori asked me to add how much she and her family loved and will miss Aunt Debbie. More recently, when Aunt Debbie wasn't herself anymore, our goodbyes were sometimes as long as our visits. I will so miss the love, the hugs, the jokes, and everything about her. I hope she has finally found that happy place that has eluded her these last few years. She really deserves it, and I hope she's laughing.
Thank you, Jerry. Pasuk says in this week's Parsha, and now Israel, as Moshe speaks in his final words to his precious people, what does God, your God, ask from you? Nothing but to revere God, your God, to walk in all his ways, to love him, to serve God, your God, with all your heart, with all your soul. Rashi famously comments on these words and brings the words of Chazal, the words of the rabbis, that from this we learn that everything is in the hands of heaven, aside for one aspect, and that is one's reverence, one's fear of heaven. Everything in our lives, it's all dictated from above. We're just actors in that play. The one thing that we control is our own fear of heaven. And the commentators explain, when you break it down, what is Yiras Shamayim, what is fear of heaven? It's the one thing that we have that we can call our own, and that is our choices in life. Choices, bechira. What plays out from our choices, that's bidei shamayim. That's in the hands of heaven. Where does the rubber hit the road? Where is a person truly tested in life? It's their choices. When my dear friend Yosef reached out to me and shared with me the news that his mother had passed, and after a little bit of a back and forth, the question was, would I, quite honestly, step out of my comfort zone and officiate? There were two reasons why the answer was a resounding yes. One is Yosef. Yosef mentioned the fact that we have been friends since kindergarten, over 50 years ago, with many ups and downs and lapses in between, but nonetheless remaining strong friends throughout. My love for Yosef is very deep. And I know that he knows that I would do anything for him, and I know that he wouldn't ask me if it wasn't important. But there was a second reason, probably a more important reason, that I said yes. And everybody that's here today is here because they knew Mrs. Fox, and I will refer to her at times as Mrs. Fox, because that's my way of connecting to her, or Deborah Gittel Bas Yitzchak Kalel Shalom, or Debbie, however you referred to her. You knew one thing about her, and it's become apparent from everybody that spoke today. She would never say no. She would do anything for anyone. And as Mrs. Perman mentioned to me when discussing the life of Debbie, she said, and when she couldn't do something for someone, it pained her. It pained her. So should I officiate at this Tzaddikus' funeral, Levaya? There's no way the answer would be anything but yes. Choices. Before I go any further, I want to just say one thing, and this is nothing against synagogue rabbis. They're amazing what they do. But maybe there's something to be said for stepping out of my comfort and officiating at this and speaking at this momentous occasion. I don't have a thick skin for this. I don't do this often. I woke up this morning and mentioned to my wife that I feel like I'm going to my mother's funeral. I never was nourished by her meatballs or chicken soup. I don't think I ever tasted it. But was I nourished growing up at the role model and the inspiration of this woman? There's no question I was nourished by her. Growing up at a time where those of us today, my age and younger, are spoiled to believe that Yiddishkeit is served up for you on a silver platter, easy to do, food, schooling, whatever it may be, readily available in a city like Chicago. That wasn't the landscape back in the day. Many didn't come out of that dedicated from fears of heaven. Debbie did. That was a choice. There was a choice every day. Many, many choices that none of us will ever know about. In the privacy and the secrecy that only between her and her Creator. She made those choices time and time again. When was I first introduced to this very special lady as a little boy, as a 5 or 6-year-old. I still remember playing over in their apartment on Shabbos with Yosef, Lego. Yosef finding ways to hide her cigarettes or saturate them in water so that his precious mother should live to 180.
And get beat for it.
And he got beat for it. But I absorbed the vibes of that home. Divorced at a time where society didn't. It wasn't acceptable. There was stigma. As a 6-year-old, did I know anything about that? No. Looking back, can I appreciate? Most definitely. But a child, as Rabbi Dr. Abraham Chursti has said often, Zichrono Livracha, he would say, a child has the uncanny ability to taste bitterness if there's bitterness in the air. There was no bitterness. There was just laughter. There was just smiles. It was so positive, and yet there were so many reasons that she could have been negative, but she chose not to. That was a choice. It was spoken about all the ways in which she had multiple jobs because of her deep sense of responsibility to take care of her family. She was the mother, she was the father, she was everything to these 3 give them a run for your money boys. That's very, very tame. She drove a school bus to be able to bring in extra money. I say those words with unbelievable amount of reverence. Living in a time where today the prevalent attitude is, what can others do for me to take care of me? We're talking about a giant amongst giants. Nothing was beneath her. For her kids, she would do anything. Hachnasas Orachim, Simcha Link. Do you know how many families the ripple effects of what your chesed has accomplished? In the world of truth, you're going to see it. You're going to be blown away by what you accomplished by your choices. And then let's talk about that original verse. Moshe says, what does Hashem ask from you? Fear of heaven. Deborah Bas Yitzchak, Zichrono Livracha, was the quintessential God-fearing person. In ways that only God himself can testify to. A role model to each and every one of us. Yosef spoke about the fact that this is a day for him of celebration, not mourning. The two are not mutually exclusive. The mourning that I feel right now, the sadness that I feel is not a sadness. It's not the tears that are welling up in front of, are not out of a feeling of deep sorrow. It's of deep inspiration. It's the type of tears that well up when you see a sunrise, when you see a beautiful, beautiful work of nature. Something that just inspires you to the point where you feel like you're going to cry. That is the celebration and the mourning coming together. So let's go through the checklist. Deborah Gittel. Bas Yitzchak Alei Shalom. What does your God ask from you? Nothing but to revere God. Check. To walk in all of his ways. Check. To love him. Check. To serve God with all your heart and with all your soul. Check and check. May you go up to the throne of God and beseech him on behalf of your family. How many times when I would bump into you over the course of the years when you were healthy, I would walk up and say, "Hi, Mrs. Fox." And she would say, "You recognize me?" I said, "Mrs. Fox, I know you for 50 years. I didn't think you'd recognize me. You're such a big shot now. Do me a favor, Rabbi Samber." I said, "Please call me Ellie." She says, "Rabbi Samber, do me a favor. Could you please daven for my family? Just keep davening for my family." I would see him and he'd say, "Yosef has a big test tomorrow. Daven for Yosef. He needs your prayers." I said, "He doesn't need my prayers. He's got your prayers." No. He needs your prayers. You've got straight access now. Go up to the throne. Daven for all of your children, your grandchildren, your great-grandchildren, for all of your friends, for all the relatives, for the community that you cared for so much, who the absence of your beautiful music that you created within the symphony of this community will be detected by anyone who's a connoisseur of what life in Jewish Chicago has been like over the last half a century. Longer. For me, it's a half a century. Bila hamavis lenetzach. U'mocha Hashem Elokim dima mi'al kol ponim tehei nishmasa tzurah b'tzorah chayim. May Hashem bind up her soul in the bond of eternal light. El molei rachamim, shechein b'amraimim, hamtzei menucha nechayno al kanfei hashechino, b'ma'alois kedoshim utahirim, kezoyer harakiya, mazhirim es nishmas Deborah Gittel bas Yitzchok, sheholcha lo'ilamo, ba'avur she'anachnu mispalalim ba'ad haskaras nishmasa, B'gan Eden tehemenu chasol, lochein ba'al harachamim yastireu b'seser kanafav lo ilomim. V'yitzror b'tzor hachayim es nishmasa, Adonai hu nachal asa, b'sanuach b'shalom mishkavo v'noimar omein. God, full of compassion, who dwells on high, grant proper repose on the sheltering wings of your presence in the lofty levels of the holy and pure, who shine as the brightness of the firmament unto the soul of Deborah Gittel bas Yitzchak, who has gone to her world, and for whose memory we pray. May her repose be in paradise. May the Master of Compassion bring her under the cover of God's wings and bind her soul in the bond of life. May the Lord be her heritage, and may she repose on her resting place in peace, and let us respond. Amen.
This includes a funeral here. The interment will take place at Waldheim Cemetery. For those who will be joining their family, you'll be lining up in the parking lot on the other side of this building. We ask to have your headlights and hazard lights on while in procession and drive as close as safety permits to the vehicle in front of you. Due to time constraints at the cemetery, we ask everybody to go immediately to their vehicles once we've concluded the announcements here. The family will be sitting shiva today at 1450 Coral Parkway from 1 p.m. to 5 p.m. And then Motzei Shabbos from 9:30 to 11 p.m. and Sunday from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. at the Feit Residence, 2926 West Pratt. That information is on our website and also on the service folders that you received when you arrived here. Please rise as we escort the casket to the hearse. And again, once we've settled into the hearse, we ask everybody to please go immediately to their vehicles. And if you're going to the cemetery, please line up on the other side of this building.